Hi, I'm Brad Alphonso. This is the Service Design Show, episode 228.
We often ask ourselves, why does our work sometimes feel like such an uphill battle? We pour ourselves into understanding the root problem, co-creating with people, designing elegant solutions, only to hit a wall when it comes to actually getting things implemented to stick. Could it be that we're missing a crucial piece of the puzzle? Not about customers, but about the very system that we're operating within? In this episode, we're going deep on that very question, exploring if different perspectives on our organizational environment could finally help us break through those persistent barriers. Hi, if you're new here, welcome to the Service Design Show, where we invite the brightest minds in our field and explore what is truly needed to design great services that resonate with people, push businesses forward, and honor our planet. Our guest today is Brad Alphonso, back for another conversation on the Service Design Show. He describes himself as someone with a constant thirst for knowledge, always wishing he'd learn things sooner, perhaps which fuels his reflective approach to our field. Brad takes real pride in the journey of positioning service design strategically within his organization, growing it from a team quite literally outside of the main building to one holding significant forums today. A pivotal experience for him involved taking a project all the way through implementation, hitting walls and learning firsthand how critical understanding the broader organizational operating system truly is. And it's that focus on the underlying systems, informed by years of practice, that forms the core of our conversation today. So in this episode, you'll learn why even our best, most solid work often gets stuck or stalled within the organization. How understanding the organizational system can help you avoid predictable dead ends. Practical ideas for integrating this crucial system thinking in your current work, even if it's not in your brief, and why our unique service design skills are perfect for navigating this organizational complexity. We also get into something that can feel a bit uncomfortable: the internal dynamics, sometimes called the game, that exist inside every organization. Brad shares why acknowledging and understanding this landscape, even if it feels separate from pure design work, is actually critical if we want our efforts to land and create lasting change. So whether you're navigating complex stakeholder relationships or simply curious about organizational realities, this conversation offers some honest reflections on that often overlooked aspect of our jobs. All right. Let's explore these organizational realities in this conversation with Brad Alphonso, and I'll be back at the end with some closing thoughts. I'm your host, Mark Fontijn, and you are listening to the Service Design Show. Welcome back to the show, Brad.
Great to be here, Mark. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. Awesome to always have a conversation with you. We're going to explore an interesting topic, which might sound a little bit abstract, but that's okay. We're going to explore it. We'll most likely leave with more questions than answers, which is even better. So just to sort of give a teaser, like, Brad, what do you hope our listeners will leave with at the end of our conversation?
Ultimately, I'd love for service designers to walk away feeling hope, feeling empowered around how they can approach solving problems and project work differently in their organization. I'd love them to be able to go back to the individual spaces and think differently and have a different perspective about some of the challenges that they're facing and how they could potentially operate differently or approach them differently. That's the key takeaway today.
Leaving with hope. Maybe that's going to be the tagline for this episode. Nice. Let's see if we can inject some hope into people. Yeah.
We're have full to of hope, be, right?
If we aren't, even in these times. Okay. Brett, so we'll be talking about enterprise operating models and operating systems. We'll get into all the specifics and details and curiosities around that in a minute. But you already hinted upon something which I want to start with, and that is that you see that our uh, design community has specific challenges that keep coming up over and over again. And I'm curious, like from your experience, you've been doing service design, you've been involved in service design for many years. Like, what are some of these challenges that you've observed?
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Like, if you think about what kind of role do you just constantly hit brick walls? I feel service designers, we our starting line, our starting point is very much going against the grain. We wear it as a badge of honor. We cut across silos, and that has its inherent difficulties. But you hear it over and over again how work either, we do all the great problem solving, we create all the great artifacts, we talk to customers, we connect all the systems in the back end and the people and the processes, and we make it all come together. And there's this, peak of delivery and change that we want to push out. And, there's a lot of energy and momentum behind this, but how often do you hear it where it just doesn't go anywhere?
Hmm.
And, there's that part, and then there's a part where it is so hard for service designers to do the work itself. It is often grating to take people on the journey. It is often grating to galvanize teams and bring people together. Why is that such a challenge? Why is it that hard?
Hmm.
And not to dwell on what's a challenge for us, because I think for many of us, and I know I myself, I get a kick out of these challenges, and that's the fun part. That's the dance that we have within the organization, right? But it's just very interesting that that's actually the case consistently.
Hmm.
And so that's what really got me thinking about, what are we operating within? This is consistently the case. Doesn't matter what service designer you speak to, in whatever size organization, in whatever pocket around the world, they're experiencing the same type of challenges. Why is that? So that's
Hmm.
what got me thinking.
Yeah, well, so I've been in the service design space, I think, since 2006, 7, and we've made a lot of progress. But at the same time, um, it's fair to say that some of the challenges that were present back then are still present. And like you mentioned, we are in the business of uh, change. We're going against the status quo. We're doing things differently, and that inherently brings resistance, brings struggle, friction. So, like, the question is whether or not that's something that can even go away ever, or if that's just part of the job, and we should sort of embrace and enjoy it. Um, we'll get deeper into that in a bit. At the same time, I'm also curious, like, Brett, you're really deep inside a huge organization that has a lot of heritage. If we flip the coin, like, what are the challenges that you see? Maybe your business or businesses in general, or these types of uh, businesses with a lot of heritage. What are the challenges that they seem to be facing nowadays? It's super generic question, obviously, but
Mm,
like
mm.
if we sort of look at that from a quite high level, what would you say?
That's a really good call out. Uh, One of the things that we definitely encounter as service designers is how we apply change. And so we are working in a space of change, and change within a complex matrixed organization that does have, uh, you know, legacy, that does have heritage. The key takeaway here is we're in the business of effectively culture change. And we're in the business of driving change in not just the way that an organization operates or designs and delivers work, but we're very much in the space of changing minds as well, right? We're we're working with mindsets, we're working with culture, and so along the lines of how difficult it is to drive change, and change manager hat is very much a role we play in a lot of this. There's a strong piece around culture, and there's a strong piece around mindsets, and just motivating and galvanizing teams around change. I think that's a really important call out, especially if you are in an older organization that has a very much entrenched culture or way of working.
Yes, and so these are maybe again the challenges and the tasks, objectives that are on our agenda. But what do you see happening internally? Like if we look at our non-design oriented friends within the rest of the business, like what are the things that give them headaches at the moment?
So, in terms of what gives teams headaches, I'm thinking along the lines of how do we start to think about what are the things that are seen and heard and what are the things that are not. And so within an organization, there's process, there's workflow, there's potentially a scaled delivery model, agile or waterfall or whatever your organization prescribes to. There's, operating rhythms between teams that might live in separate business units. Uh, and there's loose connections, or there is more cohesive connections between these teams, and they might be established, or maybe they're not. Now, certain things are very clear. They're part of a normal operating model. What's not clear and what gets hidden or is not explored further? Very abstract thoughts here. Stuff like decision making. How is decision making cascaded down? Where's the clarity of decision making? Governance of certain resources or platforms or enabling capability. How is that consolidated or divided, and how does that impact the way that work gets pushed through? How are teams being engaged, and when are teams being engaged to be able to support and be part of any kind of change? These are all silent
Mhm.
things that happen. There's no system to these types of activities potentially, and these are potentially areas where breakdowns might occur that do start to cause pain for those teams. Does that make sense?
Yeah, are these the elements that fall under your description definition of like the enterprise operating system slash model? I don't which term do you prefer to use?
I'm thinking about service design less as a activity around how we support programs or how we support projects or individual problem spaces. I'm thinking about service design as an organizational capability that operates at an organizational level. And in this sense, I'm thinking about it as effectively as an operating system in the same way that we have software that might have an operating system. Imagine service design so deeply embedded into the DNA, into the culture of an organization that it very much starts to become the way that the entire organization breathes and starts to think about how we take strategy right through to implementation. I think that's probably the missing link here. How do
Mm.
we make that really strong connection from strategy right through to execution?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, the title of our first conversation was something along the lines, "What if it was service design all the way through?" Something like that. So I'm seeing that theme continuing in here. Um, Now, it might still be a little bit abstract
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
about the enterprise operating system. How would you like? What are some of the examples, or like how would you capture the existing operating system? Because if we move to, let's say, what if service design would be the operating system, then it would also help to sort of understand, okay, where are we right now, and what is our what is our status quo? What
Mm.
is our current operating system, Brad?
So this is the interesting part. it's probably different everywhere. It would be different in every organization, right? So, how I would phrase this, if I had to start this tomorrow and I had to take it to a new organization, before you start a service design engagement or a project, spend some time understanding how the strategy or ideas work their way through to execution. Actually map that. Imagine you map that
Hmm.
like an experience, like you would a customer
Hmm.
journey, but you treat that idea as your customer and you take that all the way through. So where did they start? Where did the ideas start? Where do they start in strategy? What happens? What are the touch points for that idea right through? Understanding where there are dead ends, where there are blocks, where there are constraints. That'll be really interesting as an activity to get you started.
So are we like, is the core issue that we're trying to address here related, like you said, about strategy and decision making? So either organizations aren't making the right decisions or they aren't making decisions at all. Like, we see where things need to be going to, but we're not getting closer to that. Like, is that the core that you're trying to address with this?
I think decision making is a key. It's a key factor in the way that this mindset can start to get traction. It's definitely at what point are these decisions being made? Where are the decisions being made? Who makes the decisions? Where are the breakdowns around decisions? It wouldn't be the only deciding factor though. So to my earlier point, if you were to track an idea from inception right through to implementation, it would be unique to understand what are the different issues that occur along the way. So where does it fall down? Does it fall down in the handover from strategy to delivery?
Mm-hmm.
Does it fall down in terms of the actual delivery of the idea because of resourcing, because of feasibility constraints? Does it fall down because it enters a patch that many teams have remit over and it gets basically bundled up in tape without getting it to progress? Understanding where those particular pain points are on that journey for that idea will give you an understanding of what are the pitfalls within your organization in the system that you're operating
Mm-hmm.
and where they fall down.
I'm curious, like, yes, I understand this, and this is really interesting. At the same time, like, these organizations, companies are operating, they are probably profitable to a certain extent. They've been operating in this way for God how knows how long. So, like, how big is this? How problem? Like, is this really a problem worth thinking about and solving for us as a service design community?
I believe it is. I feel like this is, you know what this is, Mark? There's never been a time where service designers have been more important. It is because of this complexity. It is because of the types of problems that we need to solve. Every large organization, their problems are wicked. Their problems are incredibly complex. Uh, you might say that, you know, there's no clear cut solutions to these. It's a matter of trade offs. The idea here is if service design was to move and elevate out of a project or program level vantage point and to be more of an organizational capability, we would be able to unpick these problems, not by just solving the problem space for the customer or the business, but what we're actually doing is understanding what we're taking the customer and business, we're still taking that, but we're also taking in what is the organizational system that we're operating within and what are those pain points that break the ideas down or stop the ideas from going through. And so there's another layer that we start to operate at. And I feel like this is the difference where service designers do great work, it gets stalled. We have uh, service designers constantly hitting against walls. Maybe it's difficult to get teams, and maybe there's part of that being just genuine change, or maybe there's actual just genuine friction points within the culture and the fabric of an organization that we're unable to push through.
Hmm.
And so the idea here is we're able to elevate service design, pinpoint what is it at your organization, where do things break down, where do the pitfalls turn up, where do the walls come up for ideas, understanding that, and then building that into the way that you design for customer and business to be able to push your idea through.
Yes.
Does that
So
make sense?
yeah, sure. Let's keep on exploring this. Um, so elevating service design to operate at a more holistic, strategic level inside the organization. I think a lot of us are cheering at the moment and sort of celebrating. Now, one of the difficulties here is who owns this problem inside an organization, and do they experience this as a true issue? What's your take on this? What's your experience around that?
This is always going to be a challenge for us as service design or of designers owning problems or owning the ability to make decisions to drive change around problems, being the functional unit or really the master of influence on the idea. Where we can play a role here is how we're able to, and is another this could be another episode, but it's how we're able to bring together unique customer problem, the experience that we want to live for our customers and for our users. How do we bring that together with what's driving decision making within an organization? So once again, going back to your operating system view, do you understand and are you able to bring together the way decisions are being made within the organization? What's actually driving the decision making? Particular KPIs? Are there particular metrics that we're looking at? Is there particular volumes? Is there particular momentum in one particular area that everything is getting pushed into? What are those particular areas that have the energy, which you'll go through if you look at an operating system view, and you will understand, okay, for example, the business is driving everything at growth. Right. That's driving all the decision-making power. There's other things we're doing. Maybe I'm working on something that's on the other things, and I understand that, hey, hang on, why am I not getting people engaged in my work? Why am I not getting people pushing forward with my work? But maybe I'm a service designer that goes, hey, everything's getting pushed onto growth, as an example. Not uncommon at large enterprises. Growth is a key metric. If I understand that is what's pushing momentum, if I understand that that is driving decision making, then I need to figure out how I align my work, my business, and my customer problem along the lines of growth. I frame my customer, my business problem in line with growth as a key decision point. So that's how we start to think about how do we bring it together with the decision-making power or the momentum of what's being pushed in the organization.
Am I hearing you say two things? One is a service design approach can be very beneficial to, let's, for lack of better word, say orchestrate how the business operates. That's one. The other thing that I'm hearing you say is even when you're not yet operating on that strategic level with service design, it is helpful to understand what is driving decision making to be more impactful within your limited scope of work. Is that correct? Is that a fair
Yeah,
assessment?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, Mark. So I believe that every service designer has this within their power to do to start this tomorrow. So you don't need to be sitting at a strategy level. You don't need to be sitting at a level that you're influencing decision making, because that's not reality for all of us. So I believe that this is something we can all do. And so there's a few things that you'd start off doing. The first thing is, it's a very interesting exercise to map the throughput of an idea, understanding what happens, where does it start? And that's the funniest part.
Mm-hmm.
Where ideas, they start as ideas, or gut feels sometimes, or they've gone through a proper ideation process to be conceived. What happens along the way? That's a really powerful activity if you ever get the opportunity to do that.
Yeah,
And
sorry to interrupt, Brett.
go for it.
Yeah, do you have like a framework, a method, or a tool that you yourself have used to actually create clarity around this?
So where it comes back to me, and probably goes back to our earlier podcast, is I was able to actually go through that process myself.
And through which
So
process specifically?
quite literally, uh, we had a business and customer problem to solve, and I ran a normal service design project, as you would, and came out the other end with beautiful artifacts, recommendations. It was a really cross-functional piece of work. I had all the right teams involved, and then I just didn't stop. So I was able to continue driving the idea through, and this time wearing the hat of a product manager and driving the idea through, right through to implementation. Uh, Implementation of an MVP, I would say, uh, and that was years ago. And so going through that process, I was also able to see how I was able to take this MVP through, what were all the blocks, where I started to hit walls, and then post MVP, looking at the whole solution, what were some of the actual issues with getting that pushed through, and that end up being it's a massive piece of work, a huge piece of work. Years later, it's still being worked on. But what are all the things that have come up for that piece of work? And that was probably something that got me thinking about this. And so, by way of framework, we just use our own tools. We think about it as service designers. As I mentioned, imagine you mapped out this as a journey, thinking about this idea as your customer or your
Mm-hmm.
user.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And quite simply, what are the breakdowns that occur? That's one part. Uh, the other part is what service designers could do tomorrow. Your organization, what has the momentum? So by listening to your stakeholders, listening to your leadership, reading the strategy documents. I think that's something that all service designers probably could always do more of, is going over and getting really close to the high level strategy docs. If you are able to get access to those,
What are
if you're
some
able to get a run
examples?
through.
What are some of these strategy docs?
So organizations have strategies. They have
Those are 5 bullet
planning.
points usually, right?
Well, you got to dissect those bullet points. Who do you need to talk to around those bullet points? Understand what's driving. So really unpack that. You can also get online, and if you have a publicly listed company, you can find quite a lot of information online around the direction and where the company is looking to head. Really dissecting that information, cutting that up, but then really talking to your stakeholders. So tomorrow, if you get to go into the office and you want to think about this approach, you go in and you talk to your key stakeholders, talk to your senior stakeholders, and really understand what is driving momentum. And it should start
Give
to
it,
get really clear for
yeah.
you. Mm.
Brad, give us 3 questions we need to ask our stakeholders tomorrow. So you walk into the office with the chief, what is it? Let's call him the chief financial officer. Like, what will you ask them?
One I really love, I always love asking, what does good look like in 12 months? We're back in this room in 12 months' time. How do we want the situation to be? What are we expecting to see? What are we hoping to see? What's going to stop us from seeing it? What's going to help us to see it? And so you start to have an inquiry around what expectation is in the next 12 months. And that's a good way to get set and give you guardrails of where they want to take the conversation.
Do you feel like usually we're not operating at the board level, right? So we're operating somewhere further down inside the organization, and someone might say, your middle management, like, trust us, this is what we need to do. Like, how high do we need to go? How high up do we need to go with our understanding? Because if you're working for a company, like, the end goal will be to increase profit and to minimize costs. Like, if you go up high enough, that's always going to boil down to these two things. So, where do you stop? What is good enough in this case?
One of the things that we have up our sleeve as service designers, yes, we might be limited with who we can get in a room, what level, you don't have chiefs turning up for workshops. We know that's not a thing. But what you do have is we are masters of collaboration and we're masters of bringing people together, and that's very much in our remit, and that's our wild card that we get to play. So nothing beats a good old fashioned workshop. If you bring the right people on board, and just as you would with any kind of service design engagement, which anyone can do tomorrow, is run those workshops that people talk about, run those workshops that people want to be involved in. If you get enough people in the room, so going back to your question, if you get enough people in the room that you're able to bring them together, canvas what are those higher ordered questions. And yes, it might be around growth and it might be around reducing costs and creating efficiency. If you get enough of the right people in those rooms, so you've created a funnel, there's something that they want to be part of, which is great, you should be able to dive into that type of questioning. And so this is obviously building out your relationships and building out your credibility with that stakeholder group. But there's an angle there that anyone can play at any organization.
Okay, cool. So assuming that we get clarity on how decisions are made, where momentum is, what the priorities are beyond our initial scope, um, how is that going to help us? So compared to the situation in which service design is often today, how do you see, like, from your own work, like,
Mm.
what changes?
One thing that I would hope that we walk away from this conversation is understanding, if I'm able to look at how an idea works its way through, if I'm able to understand how the system works, then I would be better equipped to understand how I should approach my individual project or my program of work. I would be better equipped to think about what are those opportunities I want to dive into, what are those recommendations I am going to make, and who are the teams I'm going to engage. Because you've already unpacked all of the blocks within that system. You've created your own operating system, your own service design operating system for your piece of work, and you've started to clear a path by understanding where those breakdowns occur.
Hmm.
And so an example here might be, you've got a problem that you are solving for. There is 3 different platforms that can be a solution for this problem. You might understand that one platform definitely can't touch it. That's the obvious one. They definitely can't do it though. They absolutely cannot. There's feasibility constraints. technical constraints, there's capacity constraints, but that's the obvious one. That's the one that everyone would think about. You, with that knowledge taken into account, you would have your workarounds looking to see what other platforms could serve your solution and dial up the energy, dial up the investment, dial up the resourcing, and dial up the support for the programs around that particular platform or that team to deliver your work. That's just a very simple, quite a generic way of looking at it, but it's a way that you are using that idea and understanding the system of how the work is being broken down or constrained to play in your favor, to work the system in favor of your individual project or program work.
Cool. Yeah. So we're creating maybe not only a mental map, but maybe even a physical map to understand the environment that we are operating in. We do this really well when we look at the people who we're serving outside of the organization. Now you're also saying, like, try to understand the ecosystem within your organization. Can you help us out? Like, these can be so many different things that you need to take into account. Culture, decision making, politics, probably part of culture, resourcing, operations. Like, what were some of the most helpful things that you started to look into when trying to clarify the operating model system?
Mark, you're saying all those things, but service designers, we're doing that all the time. We're managing many, many different parts, right? So I think the key one here is really getting well acquainted with your stakeholders and ultimately truly understanding what they need to win. So as we do, and this is what all service designers do every day, we work really cross-functionally, really collaboratively with our stakeholders. And it's really dialing up a strong sense of empathy with those individual stakeholder groups. And can you actually achieve a win-win out of
Mm,
that collaboration?
mm.
And that I feel is one of the key takeaways. And I'm pretty sure I might even use that phrase with you the last time. But can you truly find a win-win? Can you truly find a way to align their interest with the other team's interests, with your interests for the work, and bring that together? And that's a really great starting point. And
So,
we do that
yeah,
we do that every day.
yeah, we do that every day, understanding those needs, pains, desires. Are we maybe a little bit, let's use the word naive in these situations where sometimes the what success looks like for the people you're working with might be: one, I want to keep my job in 12 months. Two, I would likely to be get promoted to senior manager. Like, these objectives are sort of less, I don't know, what's the word, less interesting, less purposeful, meaningful than what excites us as professionals. But this is the stuff that we're dealing with. So regardless of whether or not we map it and we're aware of it, like, that is the dynamic that we're working in, right?
Mark, we're peddlers in hope, right? That's the role of a designer. It's the role of a service designer. We are giving people a North Star in our work constantly. We're giving people a look at what the future could look like. And the hope there is the future is better than what we have now. And it gives teams and people something to orientate around when the work is hard. We hit the valley of despair in change and in transformation. But service designers, we're uniquely equipped, right? We're peddlers in hope. We put a vision ahead. We give people something to aspire to. Now, take it back to, yes, maybe your stakeholders aren't too interested in that North Star. They're probably thinking about, well, I'm looking for a promotion in a year, or I'm looking for something to build up my street cred on my resume that I can, get that next role. And, there's nothing wrong with that. That's all part of the game. And I think it's being able to understand, well, what's going to get you that promo? What's going to get you that,
Yeah.
what's going to build that resume for you? Oh, it's going to be delivering this work. Okay, great. Well, I've got something really great for you to be
Mm,
able to tick off. I
mm,
got something really great that's going to work for you to get that promotion. That's going to give you the visibility with your senior leaders. Because, as I
yeah.
said, organizations need service design more than ever now. No one can do what we can do. We've got a very unique set of skills that bring these things all together at a
Yeah.
really holistic level.
So you use a very interesting word, which I think is quite applicable here, and maybe that's sort of the nagging thing for me and a lot of listeners is you use the word game, and when you're, I think I haven't been fortunately part of large organizations for a long time, but when you're part of a large organization, a lot of games are being played. People don't call them that way, but it definitely feels like that. Understanding which game you're part of and what winning looks like is, of course, step one to actually being able to quote unquote win the game. And I feel like, again, this is rubbing against the hairs, the skin of many service design professionals who aren't really interested in playing games. And sort of they check out and say, like, it's not for me. But then the effect is, like you said at the start, you're just not being impactful. Your work isn't making it through all the way and impacting the people that you want to impact, right? So acknowledging that you're part of a game, and we can call the game the operating model, operating system, um, acknowledging that, and then understanding the rules and what winning looks like, and hopefully
Hmm.
winning looks also has elements in it that are attractive to you. Um, like it seems that that's what you're advocating for, but I'm putting words in your mouth.
I wouldn't call it the game itself, but I think there's a layer that we need to
Mm,
bring into our toolkit. I think our toolkit doesn't just stay in the workshop. Our toolkit comes out, and there's a love of craft, but being able to take that into a space where you can actually sell that to make the impact, that's another layer. So that's a different toolkit. Uh, you know, I'm going to go with a throwback here, Mark, but there's the famous story around Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla, right? Tesla, saw your eyes. Tesla loved he loved science. He was about solving the problems through science, and he believed strongly in that craft, and he believed in its value in that sense. Edison believed in science, but he also believed in being able to create an impact and lead with it from a perspective that would drive change within the real world. And so he was very good at getting support, buy-in, investment. Uh, and I know there's two different camps here, but there's two different ways that impact actually gets activated. And
mm.
so I think we need to be able to bring craft and the art that we is still deadly close to us and is our secret skill. But we also need to be able to understand what is that layer that we need to bring to drive the impact moving forward.
From your experience, what's the thing that's been missing the most from that layer? Like, have we, again, we said, why is it so hard? So, what have we been missing up to now the most?
I believe we've got great craft. As mentioned at the start, we've done great work. The work has been fantastic. The problems we solve difficult, challenging. The solutions that we propose absolutely fit for purpose. But what we're missing is, and maybe there's an influence piece, and I think, taking to that game part, but there's an influence piece, but it's understanding the system that we operate within. And maybe influencing and decision making is part of that system, culture is part of that system, or maybe it is stuff that's actually really tangible, as in platform breakdowns, data. There's different elements that come into play. But all of those factors start to create the system that we operate in, which is not what we solve when we start a project or we
Mm,
start a program. We don't think
mm,
about the system that we're operating in. So we've been nailing projects and we've been nailing craft and we do really fantastic work, but we want to drive impact,
mm,
and that's the system. That's where the work actually gets done. So
mm.
understanding the system, we bring the craft together. That's when the world start to create that impact. We're
Wh-
missing that connection.
How to, and asking questions, asking sorry, asking the right questions to the right people is part of bringing these two together. Is there anything else you feel is an obvious thing we need to do?
So what you could do tomorrow as service
Let's go.
designer?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I had to do this, if I have to start this tomorrow, I would map that idea to inception, and I'd talk to people that have done it. Either do it yourself. Doing it yourself is a lot harder, but talk to people that are doing it. People have done it, a lot of it. Talk to delivery teams. Talk to people that are the nitty gritty of execution. Talk to your strategy people. What happens to their ideas? Where do they go? What happens once they've built the strategy out? Talk to those types of stakeholders in your own project work. Talk to your own stakeholders around what's driving their momentum, what's their KPIs, what's pushing the energy. And yes, there might be some headline KPIs that everyone's working towards, but what's pushing the activity? What's
Mm,
pushing their urgency? What's pushing what success looks like? What's commentary in their circles? Take that all in. We're experts at collecting these data points. These are all
mm-hmm.
interviews, right?
Yeah.
So we can all do that. It doesn't matter what project you're working on, what level it's on, who you're engaging. You can do that tomorrow. You can start doing that. And then you will start to see, well, okay, and they might start to show up in your work as on your blueprints as, oh, there's a system here. This is a system dependency we've got, or oh, this team is a blockage in progress.
Mm,
What's causing that? You it might start to show up in your own work that way. But if you
mm,
you go in with those first few questions, mapping that idea, talking to those teams, talking to those stakeholders around the system, you'll start to get a clearer picture about how you can start to shift and change the way you think about your work. And what it will do, it'll stop you from running down, rabbit holes that are dead ends.
mm,
I've had, I myself, I've had my team push work for years that was going uphill, that we weren't able to get anywhere. We've had work that we've been driving for months trying to get engagement, technical constraints. There's different things that blocked us along the way, and so if we map the system first, we wouldn't have burnt time, we wouldn't have burnt resource, we wouldn't have burnt effort running down those things, and that's what I really want designers to do.
How do you find the time, resources, permission to actually map this, to do this work? Everybody is time constrained, like everybody has deadlines. And then here's another thing that we need to be mindful of. I know, like, the price that you're going to pay if you don't is higher at the end, but nobody thinks
Mm,
that way, right? Short term wins.
it is. I'd suggest bring it into your project scope.
And
Run it as
how?
part of
Like,
your,
yeah, okay.
make it a part of your activity. When you're scoping out a piece of work, make it a part of your activity for your project. It could, can you do it in a quick workshop?
Mm.
It can be a series of questions. It could be 5 key questions that you're asking key stakeholders in a contained space. That will start to give you a clear idea of what are those system breakdowns that you're operating within.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And especially once even if you take like the journey as a visualization and you start mapping stuff and you start showing things to people and you start showing gaps, people will contribute to that most likely. We know how this works. Like you said, this is
Hmm.
our secret skill. We know how to do this. Um, and still, like, you're sharing this as lessons, as advice, but you also said like you've been working on projects in the past that haven't gone or materialized, right? what are the lessons that you took away from those projects? Like, why do you feel they failed, or why didn't they go where they needed to go? Was it a lack of clarity or inexperience?
It's a combination of factors,
Mm,
right? If, and this is why we're having this conversation today, if I were to look at all the projects that either stalled,
hmm
all the projects that hit walls, all the projects that were, bumped on a moment's notice, can be mapped back to issues not about the work that we were doing,
hmm
not about the problem, the customer problem being really important, the business benefit being really important and quite clear. They were brought back to issues in the system we were operating. And we can call that transformation, we can call that timing, we can call that change, we can call that resourcing. And so these in isolation, these things
mm,
feel like, oh, it's an anomaly. Oh, that happened. Oh. And so it's only years later you start to think about what happened with those pieces of
mm,
work, or they get revisited, and you think, well, random, why didn't that work last time? It was because of
mm,
this. Why is it good now? Oh, because that's not a problem anymore. But it had nothing
mm.
to do with the work that you were doing. It was a system that it was operating in.
And that's so frustrating, right? Because we know we are doing good work, and the work should speak sort of for itself. And then all these other factors, like don't bother us with politics or culture or hidden agendas. Like just do the stuff that you need to do. But that is a pretty inexperienced, rookie, naive mindset, right? You have to play on that chessboard as well.
Yeah, that's it's definitely having to understand what are the moves ahead, right? So if you're starting off that problem now, that problem space and that project, you have to understand what are the pitfalls for the piece of work. Are you looking at the end of the delivery in the project, and when you're handing out this beautiful deck and artifacts, and the teams take it on board, what's actually going to get that work moving, and what's going to stop it? What's going to kill it? Another really great activity as well is running, which anyone can do tomorrow, is doing a post-mortem
Yeah,
activity. Sorry, pre-mortem activity.
both
That's an
are
oldie,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, oldie and a goodie, right? That always gives lots of value for understanding where things can fall down. So found that one to be useful in the past.
Yeah, and a pre-mortem, for people who don't know, my interpretation is that you start thinking at the start of a project, if this fails, what has happened or what could have happened, right? Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
So what went wrong that
What went wrong?
helped
Yeah,
us? Yeah,
very fun and interesting exercise. Yeah. So Brad, like, okay, let's go back to the start of our conversation. Injecting hope and thinking about alternative operating systems. How would you sort of summarize or capture your thoughts about what is that alternative operating system?
I want service designers to leave with a sense of hope that you can imagine an environment where your ideas don't stall. You can imagine an environment where you're not constantly fighting for a voice, fighting for connection, or fighting for influence. I want you to imagine a world where you are able to bring together all the right pieces that have a clear path to actually deliver change and create the impact that you hope for when you are doing that work. And so my hope is that we're able to start to think about our work in this way, how we not only operate at a project or a program level, but how we operate at a system level within an organization. And through that, we are able to take the keys and start to drive the change that we actually want to do and what we see with our work.
I think we need to bring a few behavioral psychologists on our journey in order to get there. They are invited to sit next to us in the car. So, Brad, you've shared a lot of practical advice around the ambition that might be quite ambitious and abstract. So that's great. Now, if you had to leave us with a single question to think about after this conversation, what would it be?
Single question for service designers who are working at a project, at a program, in any size organization. Why not you? Why can't you do this tomorrow? Why can't you start to think about your project in a different way? Not just at the problem space that you're solving for a customer, not just the problem space that you're solving for the business, but how you can think about it as part of an organizational system and how you can start to think about how you will change your approach. Because that's you. Everyone could do that.
Awesome. Good luck, everybody, going down the rabbit hole of understanding the organizational system. Share your notes and experiences in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.
Love it.
Brett, yeah, no, great call to action and a great question. Why not you? Let's see where this takes people. Thanks again for sharing and sort of helping us to explore this topic, helping us to see, like, as somebody recently called it, 4D chess.
Yes.
That's where we're operating in. So, Brett, I'm already looking forward to our next conversation because somehow I feel that is bound to happen.
Pleasure, Mark. Thanks so much for having me. It was really great to tease that out with you. Really enjoyed that.
I really appreciated Brad sharing his journey and thoughts with us today. It makes me think about how often we might accept struggle as just an inevitable part of the design process. But listening to Brad, it seems understanding the organizational system better isn't just about impact. It might also be about making our work less of a constant uphill battle, exposing those hidden dynamics where the real momentum lies, what the actual constraints are. Perhaps that helps us navigate more wisely and recognize which hills aren't worth dying on. It's an interesting thought about working smarter within the realities that we face. If you enjoyed today's conversation, you can do me one huge favor. Click that like button on this video and leave a short comment if you haven't done so already. Not to feed the algorithms, but to let me know whether or not we are on the right track by addressing topics like this. Finally, before we part ways, please take one moment to reflect and most of all celebrate that by joining us today, you have directed your attention towards learning and growing as a professional. So, from everyone who you are going to impact through your work, thank you for taking the time and making the commitment. My name is Mark Fontijn, and I look forward to having you with us again for a new conversation on the Service Design Show. Take care and see you soon.